Well, friends, I love Christmas morning youth night because I love Christmas morning. I love all things Christmas. If you know anything about me, it's probably that you know that I am a just crazy Christmas lover. I just love this season. I love just the joy of it, the fun of it. It's just lighthearted, and it's such a great time. I just love Christmas so much. And when I think about Christmas morning, I really think about Christmas morning as a kid. I think of like the joy of the anticipation of waiting for that Christmas morning, counting down the days till when you get to race down that morning, you look and see what's under the tree. And it's just, man, it's such a joyful memory. I think of so many of those Christmas mornings where I was just counting down the days, waiting till Christmas, counting down the hours. Maybe you're doing that right now. You know the days, you've been counting it down, you're getting psyched. And we just love, I love Christmas. I love the anticipation leading up to that. One of the things that, a memory that sticks out to me of one of the Christmases that I maybe anticipated the most happened when I was around 9 years old. And growing up, I was a Playmobil kid. Does anyone know Playmobil, the toy? It's like 5 of you. Yes, let's go. Playmobil is like a really weird like rival to Lego. It's not like Lego at all, but it's a weird Lego rival. It's very strange. My brother was into Legos, so I couldn't be into Legos. I was like the younger brother, I have to be different. So I couldn't do Legos at all growing up. So I did Playmobil. Strange toy. But there was this Playmobil castle that I wanted when I was 9 years old. I wanted more than anything in my life. This Playmobil castle was going to be the greatest thing ever. I was anticipating it. It was going to it would make my joy complete to get this castle. So I told my dad, it was on my Christmas list. We looked at it together in a store. I was psyched. I knew come Christmas morning, I would have this Playmobil castle. And man, the anticipation was heating up. In the days leading up to Christmas, my parents used to put like their gifts for us under the tree a few days early. Maybe some of your families will do that as well. And I noticed under the tree, there was a gift for me it was a big gift. It was like the perfect size for that Playmobil castle. And I knew, I'd looked at that gift so many times, I knew without a shadow of doubt, in that box was going to be my Playmobil castle, and my life would be complete on Christmas morning. So Christmas morning comes along, I'm racing downstairs, we get down to the gifts, we have breakfast together. Our family, we really stretched out Christmas morning. We didn't jump right into it, but we get through the gifts, and we always we save the best ones for last. So you always wait on that big gift. So all Christmas morning, I'm waiting on this big gift that I know is gonna be a Playmobil castle. Now, as I'm opening all my other gifts, I'm finding a bunch of other Playmobil accessories. So it's building up the case. The Playmobil castle is in this box. And man, it was insane. Then it comes the moment. I tear open this box. I rip it open. I look in this box, and it's a blanket. There is no Playmobil castle in this box. Instead, it's a blanket that I quickly found out it's actually a handmade blanket that my mom made for me. Now, I'm feeling terrible right now because I hate this blanket so much. All I wanted was a Playmobil castle, but I don't want to show this to my mom. I want to show my mom, thank you so much, this is such a great blanket. But really, I just wanted my Playmobil castle. And it was a massive bummer in that moment. All the anticipation had led to this moment to get a homemade blanket. Actually, it turns out I still have the homemade blanket. I don't have the Playmobil castle anymore, so I don't know what that has to say. But as the morning progressed, we finished all the gifts under the tree. We thought gifts were over for that day. I thought this was it. Everything I'd been anticipating for, it had fallen through. It wasn't quite what I'd hoped for. But then my dad came up to me and ushered me back to my parents' bedroom. And when I went back into their bedroom, there, sitting on the bed, fully set up and ready to go, was the Playmobil castle. And it was amazing. It was, sure, you can clap for the Playmobil castle. It was amazing. amazing. It was amazing. And that's like, when I think of anticipation on Christmas morning, I think of that story, that moment of the Playmobil Castle when I was 9 years old. And maybe you can come up with a similar story. Maybe you'd have something similar that you'd think about of like, what's that gift, that thing that you've anticipated? Maybe it is something this year. Maybe you're living in that story right now and you're anticipating that thing. You've already seen the gift under the tree. You are psyched up. You're waiting to see what is going to happen on that morning. I don't know where you're at with that, but you've probably felt this kind of anticipation before, like I have. And that is what this series is all about, anticipation. Anticipation, but specifically, we are focusing on anticipation for really the heart of Christmas, what Christmas is all about. Like, we love the fun parts of Christmas. I'm all about it. I absolutely love it. But Christmas is all about Jesus at the end of the day, right? It is about the coming of Jesus. So that's why this series is called Anticipation, preparing for the coming of Jesus. As we think about Christmas, we want to be prepared for that, prepared to celebrate that moment, this day that we mark aside every year to celebrate Jesus, celebrate him coming here to this earth. And last week, Stephen kicked this message off by talking about a guy who did a lot, really, to prepare the way for Jesus. Do y'all remember the central figure Stephen talked about last week? John the Baptist, that's it, yes. So we talked about John the Baptist. And John the Baptist really paved the way for Jesus. Like, it was his whole ministry, like from his birth, God kind of set him apart to pave the way for Jesus, to prepare the way for Jesus to come. So Stephen kind of broke down in that message really two aspects of anticipation. What does it mean to anticipate something? There's kind of these two big ideas, is that anticipation requires eagerness and readiness. It requires eagerness and readiness. Now, here's what I mean by that. Like, think about when you anticipate Christmas morning. What does that look like? What does that mean to anticipate Christmas morning? Well, there's a couple aspects of what we do when we're anticipating Christmas. First off, there's eagerness. There's excitement, right? Like, I hope you're excited for Christmas. Like, anticipation, there's a level of excitement. There's a level of eagerness leading up to it. But then there's also readiness. Like, you have to get ready for Christmas too. You got gifts to buy, you got shopping to do, you have preparation to do, wrapping, all of this stuff. But there's an aspect of just being eager for Christmas is probably not enough. You have some preparation to do. Maybe you're experiencing that now. You'll experience more and more of that as you get older. But there's an aspect of eagerness and readiness that it was really required to anticipate Christmas. Same thing, this is what John was doing with Jesus. He's hyping people up. He's preaching the way of Jesus. He's saying, someone is coming who's so much greater than I am. I'm not even worthy to tie the shoelaces on his sandals. Like, he's setting the stone. This guy is coming who is so great that I'm not even worthy to be with him. The Messiah is coming. He's getting people hyped up. It's the eagerness. But then he's also getting people ready for Jesus. Because John is preaching this central message, is repent. He's preaching repentance. He's going around telling people to repent of their sins. Repentance, really just this idea of like turning from one way of doing things to the other. It's changing the way you live, turning from one way, turning from the way of sin, turning to the way of faithfulness to Jesus. So John's going around preaching this message. He's anticipating Jesus's birth. Well, really, Jesus' ministry. They were born around the same time. He's anticipating Jesus' ministry that is to come. And I think we learn a lot from John about anticipation, about what this looks like. But tonight, I actually want to talk about another John, the other John in the Bible, not John the Baptist, so please don't be confused when I'm saying John. I want to talk about John the Apostle. John the Apostle. This is a pretty gnarly guy. John was a young Jewish man, and I want to kind of just maybe speculate what John's life must have been like. Well, like most young Jewish boys, John would have probably went to like a Hebrew school. He probably would have studied in a Jewish context. And John didn't grow up with any devices. John didn't grow up probably didn't even have books to read. He didn't have resources of that nature. So John was immersed in the Torah, the Hebrew Scriptures. These are the first 5 books of our Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. John probably spent his days in school studying these books, even memorizing these books. Actually, it's likely John probably even memorized all 5 of these books, which is like shocking when we think about that. Like, I can't even imagine memorizing a full chapter, like chapter 1 of Genesis, that I've read a million times. But like, John probably memorized Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy when he was a young guy, because he was a good Jewish boy. And he traveled with his family, probably went to synagogue every Saturday, celebrated Shabbat, took this time to rest in this rhythm of his life. And he would go to synagogue, he would learn under a rabbi, and these rabbis they would read from the Torah. Because John didn't have his own copy of the Torah. He would probably study it, but he probably didn't have his own copy at home. These were each scrolls. This wasn't a book like we have. And he would go to synagogue and he would listen to the rabbi read from the Torah. And when he did that, John really became saturated as a young man in this Jewish worldview. It's what he knew. It was his whole life. I mean, it's hard for us to even imagine this because we have so much information everywhere through social media, through books, through TV shows, all of these different narratives in our life. Well, John was just saturated in the Torah. This was what he had. He didn't have access to all information at one click of a button like we do. And he was saturated in the Torah, grew up knowing this, grew up loving this book. And he grew up hearing about this figure called the Messiah. The Messiah was this figure who was going to come in and was going to save the Jewish people. Like, he was going to set this nation right. The Jewish people had once had a huge, prestigious kingdom under King David, but now they're living in exile. They're living under the reign of a different kingdom. Their lives probably aren't the greatest. And this Messiah, they believed, would come in and he would set things right. He would put Israel back on the map, back where they were supposed to be ever since the beginning. He would make Israel this grand kingdom, like they were in the time of David. And John probably grew up knowing this, believing this, awaiting this with eager anticipation. Then, as a young man, he was probably like a late teenager. A lot of people say. I don't know this for a fact. I don't study this myself, but a lot of people say John was probably a young guy, and John was called by Jesus. Jesus shows up on the scene. I don't know how John heard about Jesus. Maybe he heard about this wandering rabbi who traveled from town to town, preaching radical messages and performing miracles. Maybe John had a close friend who was healed by Jesus and he'd heard about that. Maybe John knew someone who'd heard stories of Jesus' teaching and he was captivated by it. Who is this man walking around teaching with such authority? But whatever happened, John was captivated by Jesus, and he went to follow him. I mean, in fact, Jesus called him and said, "John, come and follow me." And this sounds kind of strange to us. If you just hear about some wandering teacher and he says, "Come and follow me," you'd be like, "That's creepy," and probably. But this wasn't creepy in John's time. This is actually a normal cultural thing, that a Jewish rabbi would call people to come and follow them and come and learn from them, come and learn to live like them. So this is what happened for John. Like, Jesus, this Jewish rabbi, said, "Come and follow me, come and learn under me." And John accepted the call. And for 3 years, he followed Jesus. He witnessed Jesus do incredible, miraculous things. He witnessed Jesus' incredible, radical teachings. He saw all of these things that must have just shaked his entire paradigm. But along the way, he began to believe that Jesus is the Messiah. Like, Jesus is this one that we've been waiting for. And yet, Jesus, his life, his ministry didn't look like what John probably grew up imagining the Messiah to be. Jesus wasn't starting a kingdom. Jesus wasn't trying to fight against Rome. He wasn't trying to build Israel's nation back up. He wasn't trying to establish a physical kingdom. He wasn't ruling with a sword. Like Jesus wasn't doing any of the things that John would have imagined the Messiah was supposed to do. But he came to believe that Jesus is the Messiah. And then John watched as Jesus, this man that he was following, that he placed his hope in, was arrested. This man was tried in a false sham trial, and John watched as he was crucified. John, one of the few disciples, few followers of Jesus that was actually there when Jesus was crucified. He saw this happen. John had a really special, close relationship with Jesus, to the point that, kind of a weird flex, but he calls himself in his gospel the disciple who Jesus loved. And they had this really close bond, this close relationship together. And even to this point that when Jesus is on the cross, John is sitting there, Jesus' mother Mary is there, and Jesus looks at John and says to him, I'm paraphrasing, take care of my mother. Like, take care of her. I'm about to die. Like, this is it. And he says to his mother, take care of John. And he kind of like establishes this relationship between Mary and John. Like they were tight. And then as Jesus died, John's hopes must have shattered. Because apparently he was wrong. Apparently Jesus wasn't the Messiah. But as we all know, the story doesn't end there. Because fortunately in 3 days, Jesus rises again. And this radically changes John's life. Now John knows for sure, wait a minute, this dude definitely is the Messiah. I thought he was before, but now I absolutely know this guy is the Messiah. He has defeated death. Like, we expected a Messiah who would defeat Rome, who would defeat a kingdom, but instead we got a Messiah who defeated death. Something far more powerful, something far more persuasive. No human in the history of humanity has ever been able to defeat death before. Sure, people have defeated kingdoms before. That's happened plenty of times. John probably knew about Alexander the Great. Like, he knew about people who've defeated kingdoms, but he's never seen someone who could defeat death. And now he's seen this man who's able to defeat death. And he followed Jesus again. For our 40 days, Jesus on earth going around. We don't know exactly what Jesus did in those 40 days. Maybe he's teaching, maybe he did some more miracles. I don't know. He appeared to people, did some gnarly things. And then at the end of those 40 days, John was probably there to see Jesus ascend into the heavens, which I can't even imagine what that must have looked like, to see a man float into heaven. I don't know what that was like, but John was there and watched Jesus, this man that he knew and loved, go into the heavens. And this moment, this transformed his life so much that John committed his whole life to this mission. Like, committed his life that he was going to continue Jesus' mission. He was not going to let Jesus' movement die here. He was convinced this man is the Messiah. His message is radical. It's not the Messiah we thought we were going to get, but instead he is so much better, to the point that John starts going around and teaching the way of Jesus. He starts teaching it, going around to the early church, going to different churches, teaching about this Jesus, the Christ. He becomes a central figure in the early church who does a ton in teaching and laying the groundwork for Jesus. And I imagine in the midst of John's teaching, there was a promise that he clung to. Something that he heard Jesus say several times throughout his ministry. He actually records it in 14th chapter of John's gospel. It's these words of Jesus here where Jesus says, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, I would have told you, or if that were not so, would I have told you that I am going there to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back. I will come back and take you to be with me, that you may also be where I am." And John treasured this promise of Jesus to say he was going to come back. Jesus was going to return at some point. John didn't know when this was. He probably knew Jesus' concept of time was quite different than his concept of time, but maybe John thought Jesus would return later in his life. I don't know what John may have imagined about this, but he clung to this promise. Eventually, when John starts writing books of the Bible, he writes this down in his gospel account. John also writes 3 letters, the books of 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. And he also writes this other book called Revelation. That's maybe one of the weirder books in our Bible. And John writes this book of Revelation. He actually writes this towards the end of his life. John is near death, and he's actually exiled by the Roman government. At this time, the Roman government had taken up, they began to persecute Christians more and more. And for some reason, John was perceived as a threat of some nature. So what did the Roman government decide to do? They decided not to kill him, but to place him on this island off in the middle of nowhere, the island of Patmos, where John would be exiled. And he would have to live out the rest of his days alone on this island, or maybe there were other prisoners on this island, I'm not sure. But he'd have to live out the rest of his days stranded on the island of Patmos. And he did. But in these days on this island of Patmos, Jesus actually appeared to John again. Appeared to him in maybe some kind of vision or dream. I don't know what this experience was like, but in some form, Jesus appears to John again and outlays this revelation, this revelation of what is to come, of what's going on in the world now, of what's to come in the future. And it's this book called Revelation in our Bible. John records the words of this vision, and it's found in our Bibles today. And this book is kind of weird to us. If you've ever tried to read Revelation, anyone ever tried to read Revelation before? Just a quick show of hands. Got a handful of us. Yeah, it is a strange book. It's kind of hard to understand. And a lot of that is because it's written in a certain style, a style of literature called apocalyptic literature. And basically, don't think apocalypse, think end of the world. That's not what apocalypse means in Hebrew. The word apocalypse, it really just means an unveiling. And what Revelation is it's this way of revealing, of unveiling what's really going on in the world. Is that we think it's just this physical world, just these physical things that are happening, but there's this huge spiritual, cosmic thing going on. And Revelation is revealing to us what is going on there. And Revelation is also making a promise of what's to come in the future. And it's that Jesus is going to return. John believed that promise. He clung to that promise, that Jesus' mission was not done. He came once, he's going to come again. He's going to return at some point. And John held on to that promise. The early church held on to that promise. John believed that right up to and through his death. The early church believed that. It was a core teaching in the early church that Jesus would return. And still, to this day, it is a cornerstone of our faith, is that Jesus' work is not done yet. He's going to return. And that is what I want us to talk about for the next few minutes. It's that Jesus is going to return. And I guess a question for you to think about is, do you anticipate the return of Jesus? Do you anticipate the return of Jesus? I'm willing to bet, if we went around and we were to answer that question, and I would ask each of you to share what your answer is, I'm willing to bet that at least for the majority of us, the answer would be no. That's probably not something that we anticipate per se. And I really do understand that. A lot of us in this room, we're young. We have our whole life ahead of us. There's a lot of things yet to come in our lives that maybe you're looking forward to in life, and you really don't want Jesus to return tomorrow because you've got plans next Friday. And I get that. I understand why we would feel that way. I think for a lot of us, we probably do, but I think a lot of times our lack of anticipation for Jesus' return is really rooted in a lack of understanding about his return. A lack of understanding about what this means, about why this is so significant. Because I think typically when we know something is going to be upgraded, when we know something is going to get better, we don't grieve about the old thing. So like maybe you had a phone upgrade before. Maybe you're looking forward to a phone upgrade this Christmas. You're looking forward to getting that brand new phone, that new model. Well, you're probably not thinking about how sad it's going to be to lose your old phone, because you know and you trust and you believe that new phone is going to be infinitely better than your old phone. It's going to be so much better that you're not worried about your old phone, because you know that new one, you trust that new one will be better. And I think when we think about Jesus' return, when Jesus returns, he's going to set things new. It's going to be different. His second coming, his return will be different than his first time coming here to earth. And when he does that, he's going to set things new. He's going to restore this world. He's going to make everything new, and it will be different, but it will be better. So why is this good news? Why is the return of Jesus good news? I want to briefly unpack a couple reasons that I think this is really important. The first one is this, is that Jesus' return is good news because we will be fully united with him. When Jesus returns, we will be fully united with him. And I don't know how that hits you when you hear that. Maybe that's not exciting to you when you hear that, but I want you to think about those moments in your life where you have, like, maybe it's that retreat high. Think about that moment when you got home from the retreat and you were just so in love with God in that moment. You were so psyched about your friendships, about your community that you had. You experienced the sense of peace. You experienced the sense of God's love. So imagine those moments, like maybe it's when you're with your good set of friends and you really just feel a sense of joy. You feel a sense of happiness that just, you can hardly explain. Y'all, like, I think God's presence is like that. God's presence is love, it's joy, it's peace. And when we are fully united with Jesus, when he returns, like, that's going to be our life. That's going to be our constant experience, is this feeling of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, all of these virtues that we strive for, that we hope for. This is going to be our experience of life, because we will be fully united with Jesus. Revelation writes about this and uses imagery. Revelation uses all kinds of imagery, where John writes about this wedding feast. And it's really just this image to imagine the church and Jesus coming together in this wedding ceremony and being fully united. Like when a husband and wife get married, they are united in this bond. He uses just this image to just describe what that will be like when Jesus returns, is that the church will be fully united with Jesus. This is good news. This is also good news because when Jesus returns, he will defeat evil. There's this other story in Revelation about this baby and this dragon. It's this gnarly story. It's a gnarly version of the Christmas story that shows the spiritual world. And it's where Jesus defeats Satan. He defeats Satan. He bonds Satan up. Satan is thrown in the depths of hell where he can no longer wreak any havoc. There is so much evil in our world. There's brokenness everywhere. We hear about it all the times. Maybe you feel that personally, through brokenness in your family, in your life, maybe brokenness in your physical body. Maybe it's in the news, something that you see. There's evil all around us in this world. But when Jesus returns, it is good news because he will defeat evil. He will defeat all evil. There will be no more evil in the world when Jesus returns. And finally, the return of Jesus is good news because he will restore his good world. That did not change. My apologies. It is good news because he will restore his good world. Jesus will fix this world. When Jesus returns, I think it's sometimes we imagine we're just going to float off to heaven and we're going to be chilling on a cloud, singing with an angel. And I don't know, maybe that'd be fun for 5 minutes. But I think after that, that'd get kind of boring. And I don't think that's what heaven's like. I don't think that's what it's like when Jesus returns. He's going to restore his world. We read in Revelation about a new heaven and a new earth. I mean, imagine the most beautiful things in this world. Maybe there's natural wonders that you want to go see, or these beautiful pieces of human creation, if it's a beautiful form of art, or some great culinary creation, or the great friendships you have. Every piece of goodness that we experience in this world, is just a foretaste of what's to come. I mean, imagine a world where there's no brokenness, there's no evil, there's no sin. Like, this is just a foretaste. And if we imagine the new creation to be anything less beautiful than this world is right now, you're imagining it wrong. Like, sometimes we do imagine that. We just think we're sitting on a cloud. I think that's such a terrible way to think about this, that no, heaven is going to be so good, so beautiful. The new creation, when Jesus returns, he will set this world right. He will restore his world. So friends, Jesus' return is really good news. It's good news because we will be fully united with him. It's good news because he will defeat all evil. And it's good news because he will restore his world. So as we close, I want to challenge you with this. I want to challenge you. It's a very simple challenge. It's just this. Anticipate the return of Jesus this Christmas season. Like at Christmas time, we think a lot about Jesus' first coming to earth. We think about his incarnation. We think about the baby being born in the manger, and that is rightfully so. Let's do that. Let's anticipate that. Let's be excited about that. But let's also realize that the story's not over yet. Jesus is going to come back. He's going to finish the work that he did here. He's going to make everything new. It is going to be so good. Y'all, this is something for us to be excited about. And I want to call you to anticipate this. Anticipation requires two things. It's eagerness. Be excited that this is good. Believe that this is good. Be eager for it. And it's also readiness. It's being prepared. What does that mean to be prepared for Jesus' return? I think it's quite simply, it's follow his teachings. Live faithfully. Be a disciple of Jesus, faithfully following him today and tomorrow and throughout your life. Just follow him faithfully. It's that simple. So, friends, anticipate the return of Jesus this Christmas season.